Over the last few weeks, I've been working with you, showing you mini games to play so that you can learn how the pieces can work together to be able to accomplish a common goal. Now, for the first time, we've actually set up the pieces, all of the pieces, to be able to play. What are some of the things we need to be aware of? One is to make sure the board is set up correctly. And again, the white square is always to the player's right. And you'll notice that whoever's going to be playing the black pieces, the white square is always to their right. That's how you know the board is set up properly, and then you can be able to see how the pieces are supposed to be set up. Now, we're getting ready to start to play, but the problem is, as a new player, you just know how the pieces move, but you don't really have a sense of strategy, not a complete strategy anyway. So an excellent book that I would suggest you keep in your arsenal is a book by Mr. Reuben Fine, Chess the Easy Way. And what I love about this book is it gives you 10 things to know about the openings, 10 things to know about the middle game, 10 things to know about the end game. And so it helps you. It's like a grandmaster that's an elite world-class player, that's a grandmaster whispering in your ear telling you, hey, think about these things in this part of the game. Are you doing all these things? And so it's a nice reminder to keep you focused. So I love this book. It's in the old descriptive form of notation. And I know for some of you new players who are learning the algebraic, you're like, hey, I don't want to learn the old way. Well, I'm a player who's returned to the game after many years away from it, and I didn't want to learn the new way. But now I have. It didn't take me that long, and so I suggest you buy this book. It should be in your library. It's going to be great for you. I wound up actually for the first, I'm not really, it's not really very clear, but I wrote down those 10 things, 10 rules for the opening. And so I'm going to introduce the first opening, probably the most popular of all, which is the Ruy Lopez. Now, there are openings and then there are variations of openings. So the book that I was referring to before talked about 10 rules for the opening, which was 1, open with either the king's pawn or the queen's pawn. These are just general rules. Number 2, whenever possible, make a good developing move which threatens something. Number 3, develop knights before bishops. Number 4, pick the most suitable square for a piece and develop it there once and for all. Number 5, make 1 or 2 pawn moves in the opening, not more. Number 6, do not bring your queen out early. Number 7, castle as soon as possible, preferably on the king's side. Number 8, play to get control of the center. Number 9, always try to maintain at least 1 pawn in the center. And number 10, do not sacrifice without a clear and adequate reason. These are 10 rules for the opening. So let's see, just for the beginning of the Ruy Lopez, according, as I mentioned before, there's many variations, but the main lines are A, B, C, D, E4. That's on the algebraic, and this is E5, and then this is N to F3, and this is N to C6, and then there's a B to B5. And then from there, there's variations. And as we look at this and we go back over the 10 rules, we open with either the king's pawn or the queen's pawn, which we did. Whenever possible, make good developing moves. And so we're bringing out our pieces. And so that's what they mean by good developing moves. You notice that we brought out the knight before the bishop on this opening. And we've been attempting to pick the most suitable square for a piece. So far, we've only made 1 pawn move, so we're staying within those 10 rules. Notice we have not yet brought out the queen, so we're accomplishing that task. Soon we're going to need to think about castling. We're fighting for the center, and we're always trying to maintain 1 pawn in the center. Notice both white and black both have pawns in the center. And finally, we're not going to try to sacrifice without a clear and adequate reason. And if you can keep going with those things in mind, again, I recommend highly that book. If you can keep going with those 10 things as you're working through the opening, it's like a grandmaster whispering in your ear saying, hey, remember the important things, remember the important things. There are going to be exceptions to the rule, but by and large, these are really sound fundamental steps to take as you're trying to figure out what to do as a new player. Now, that being said, I'd like to show you some books that I consider that you should strongly consider purchasing, and they are for the new player. And these are written by grandmasters, so they are elite players. You'll see these available. There's I.A. Horowitz, How to Win at Chess, and this has a complete chess course on openings, middle games, and end games. Now it's really geared for the beginner level player, and so you've got to start somewhere. Now there's another author that I really like, and that is Reuben Fine, and so he has some things. Practical Chess Openings by Reuben Fine. It's long since passed away. You'll have the one on the middle game, and that's going to take you through introductory strategies and tactics for the middle game. And then finally, a very good book on basic chess endings for Reuben Fine. So, and then I couple that with suggesting the book that I mentioned before, Chess the Easy Way, which gives you those strategies, so it's things to keep in mind. 10 ideas for the openings, 10 ideas for the middle game, 10 ideas for the end game. I myself wrote down on these cards those 10 principles to keep in mind, because I want to be able to have that in my mind as I'm playing an opponent. What should I be thinking about? What should I be thinking about? What should I be thinking about? So I can make the strongest moves possible. How much time should I devote to study? Well, think of it in, I've read some other books which talked about 20, 40, 40. So 20% on the openings, 40% on the middle game, 40% on the end game. And I'd say that that's a pretty good idea, because you got to work on all three phases. You'll find that as a developing player, you will have opponents that put a lot of time in on the opening, but if you can weather that storm against them, you'll find that they play weaker in the middle game and possibly even weaker in the end games. But if you can have a complete game by going through and studying all three phases of chess, the opening, the middle game, and the end game, that's really going to set you up. If you get through the books like these, it should take you a year, maybe 2 years, but you're going to be at least a beginning intermediate player and sound, and then you can be able to grow from there. So this week we've introduced the very beginning of an opening for the Ruy Lopez, and remember, there's many variations beyond those initial moves, and so I wanted to introduce that to you with the idea of those 10 principles to follow in the openings. So these are 2 authors I recommend. It's in, again, the old descriptive method of notation, but that's okay. You can learn that, and of course you can learn the one that's most popular now, which is the algebraic. And what's good about these older ones? Well, what's good about the older ones is they're less costly, because everybody who's the newer players now don't want to have to learn the old notation style, and that can give you some bargains here, and it was for me. So good luck, and I will see you next week with a new lesson.